Hello, and welcome back to For the Penguins. I am your host, Mika Lemligota. Thank you so much for joining. Last week we talked with Lily about the alternative protein industry. We talked fungi, we talked lab-grown meat, we talked policy. So if any of those subjects are of interest to you, feel free to check that out. This week we talked with Mike Jehl about being a data science consultant. He works with utilities to make sure that they can accept clean energy onto the grid and therefore into your home. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's a great episode. And action. Welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining. I know you came all the way in the cold to get here, so I'm going to make sure that this is a good interview and worth your time. So please go ahead, introduce yourself. What do you do and why are you here?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's a joy to be here. I'm a quantitative analyst at a small economic consulting firm. We work primarily with utilities and regulatory agencies. And yeah, happy to talk more about it and dive into anything sustainability or clean energy related.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So explain. So what is your job? Like, what does an analyst do? I know it's very broad.
Yeah, so we're a consulting firm, so I'm kind of like a data science consultant. So I'm a jack of all trades sort of data scientist. So I do everything from programming and rigorous analysis to technical proposals to writing reports and giving presentations. And I guess to back up a little bit, we work with utilities to try to get them to get clean energy onto the grid, right?
I was going to ask, how is that sustainable? Like, how do you relate to sustainability?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So the electric grid is old, it's aging, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to modernize it and to try to figure out how to get solar and wind and, these renewable energy sources onto the grid. And our focus at our little consulting shop is primarily to make sure that the utilities are running effective programs that balance the supply and electricity of the demand to balance the supply and demand of electricity.
Okay.
Because the weird thing about electricity is that it needs to match at all times, the supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So if it's out of balance, the electric grid could collapse. There could be blackouts, that sort of thing, right?
So is there a difference between the demand in like the normal electricity that we've been using versus renewable energy?
Yeah. Not really. Electricity is electricity, right? It's all just electrons in the end, but the source of the electricity is key, mm-hmm. right? And right now, the electric power sector is responsible for about 33% of all CO2 emissions in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So the primary generation sources are, things like coal and natural gas, and we'd like to see a lot more solar, wind, nuclear on the grid, and it's difficult to balance those resources because they're intermittent. So, solar, the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. So, helping utilities make sense of that is our work.
So, an example would be like a utility will come to your company and be like, "Hey, we want to put 20 solar farms on the grid in the next year. Is that possible? How are we supposed to do it? Is that kind of like the request that would come to you or your team?"
Yeah, something like that. Or, what's the forecast for electric vehicle adoption in this area? And
so that they can prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly. Do we have the infrastructure that can manage that added load? Do we have to invest in substations? And God forbid, do we have to invest in more, coal-burning power plants to supply that electricity?
Okay.
For those electric vehicles.
So is the biggest change or challenge that you're facing, it's not necessarily dealing with different types of generation, but dealing with the changes in trends that of people using that electricity?
So we don't want electric utilities to invest in backup power plants to supply electricity to the grid when more electricity is needed, right?
Like peak power plants,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, we want to avoid the investment in peaker power plants, right? So there are a lot of programs that utilities run called demand response programs. So during periods of peak stress on the grid, they'll ask like a subset of the population who have volunteered to reduce their electricity consumption to curtail that demand, and they'll be compensated for that.
Yes.
So yeah,
Like load shedding
exactly.
programs. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, my role a lot of the time is to analyze the data associated with that program and basically like tell them that it's justified, right? You were able to shed enough load to justify the cost of the program, and because of this, like you're not going to have to invest in more peaker plants.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's where the sustainable part also comes in. Like you're trying to prepare for the future, and the future is more green.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, so tell me more about how you got to this position, because I mean, you're the first data analyst that I know that focuses on in this area.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I haven't heard of this before.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. How did I get into this position? That's a good story. So I'm definitely in the career change category.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I'm in my early 30s right now, and I was pretty lost in college. I was studying marketing, pre-med, all of that. Yeah, all over the place. I ended up with philosophy and psychology. I actually didn't even graduate. So I really hacked it out in my early to mid 20s. Worked a lot of odd jobs, everything from like Trader Joe's cashier to, clerk at a manufacturing plant.
Wow.
But during this entire time, I was, passionate environmentalist, right? I saw planet Earth as a freshman in college, and my mind was changed forever. But it becomes pretty despairing to consume a lot of information and not actually do anything about it, right? So at one point in my late 20s, I made a conscious decision to basically invest all of my time and money into learning data science and programming, and trying to get a career at the intersection of data science and mitigating the effects of climate change. I think we're at like a rare moment in history where technological innovation is sort of meeting the like economic opportunity in like doing a lot of really interesting and effective work in this space to mitigate the effects of climate change. And yeah, I decided to go for it. And
So what made that switch? Also, how did you find those resources to kind of get more educated like on it? Did you just realize, yes, understanding data is what I want to do, and then you just got straight into it? Or did you use YouTube to find ideas? Like, how did you get there?
Well, I've always been pretty good at math. Didn't study it in college, but I've always been pretty good at math. Like, I've always kind of wanted to get into programming. Obviously, like, it's a very valuable skill. So I was looking for both like employable skills and like the opportunity to make a difference in the sustainability sector, right? And yeah, I mean, I basically taught myself most of what I know today. With everything being on the internet, it's just a matter of time and discipline. So yeah, I sunk a lot of my free time over the years into building personal projects for my portfolio, just kind of hacking it out, right? And then I did like a little data science boot camp for a couple months, and then that's where I sort of found the network to, really pursue like different jobs, right? And I found someone who worked at my current company, and she's able to connect me with that, and yeah, hustled my way into it.
Would you say that everyone else that you worked with has a similar path than you? To be a data analyst, you need to have a college degree? Do you need to do certain boot camps? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, well, I guess first off, I'm a quantitative analyst, so it's more like a data scientist. So it's like heavy in statistics, it's heavy in programming, and yeah, I guess that's the difference. Like not as much statistics in the data analyst role.
Was the boot camp on that as well that you did?
Yeah, it was data science focused. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But no, like a year ago, I wouldn't have been admitting publicly that I didn't have a degree, right? Like most everyone I work with either has a PhD or a master's. Yeah, it's a very niche set of skills in particular for this role. I'm very fortunate to be working with a lot of very talented, literal experts in this field.
Well, I really like that because I also think that talking about sustainability sometimes it can seem like, oh, you need a PhD to be able to even get into the industry, or it seems like the more niche area that you work in, the more education that you need. But I really like the idea of people, of anyone, even if you can or can't afford college or you don't know what you want and like, a similar path to you where you're just figuring it out maybe later in your 20s, that you can find the resources online.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all there. You just gotta, find the back door.
And yeah, exactly. And so tell me a little bit more about what resources you use, because I think that would be great for people to know in case they're interested.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think there are too many resources online at this point, honestly. At the time, I, took foundational computer science courses through edX, Coursera. And once I got the fundamentals down of a couple different languages, I decided to focus on one coding language in particular. And then I built up a portfolio of projects, right? So I thought, okay, what does an employer want to see? Well, they want to see that you have skills, So I made sure that I could market those skills and like showcase them while also, being very passionate and like clearly demonstrating that I want this job, right? So yeah, it takes a lot of hustle and shameless self-promotion, but that's what you got to do.
Which I feel like everyone should do at this point, especially if you're passionate in this. Like people can be very self-promoting in like Wall Street and like other like big industries. Like I think sustainability should be one of those as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And like the thing about sustainability is that like this stuff has to happen, like the work has to happen. And the people who work in this space realize that. So I think I don't want to make like a generalization about the field as a whole, but I think if you can show that you have the skills and that you really care and like want to do the work, then you're going to be hireable.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree. So where did you find this passion that like you said was so important, to market yourself?
I mentioned the despair part, a lot of despair, like the state of the world, the state of, corporations doing morally ambiguous things, to say the least. I think college was pretty eye-opening, and I didn't exactly like cope with the state, like the information that made me realize like the reality of things, right? Like there's a lot of good in the world, but
to be fair, you studied philosophy, you said?
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to make you think a lot.
Yeah. It's like, wow, we really decided on, like, why didn't we read more philosophy when designing, like, how the world works? Like,
hey, I'm sure that all the philosophers think the same.
Yeah. Well, once I reached, like, a certain level of stability in my 20s, I decided, okay, well, I'm going to have to work like 40 to 60 hours a week for, the next few decades, right? Like I might as well commit my like big chunk of my life to something that I think matters, that has an impact on others, on future generations. And feels pretty good in the end.
And now taking a complete turn, I've been asking everyone to provide their salary in ranges, to kind of inspire people that maybe like they're scared to get into sustainability because they think that it won't pay well.
Yeah.
So I have categories and I made them kind of like I Googled data analytics. I didn't know it was different than what you did by in those categories. And this can be completely made up, but I also don't know anything about this. So we'll see. So if you make $60K or below a year, I'm going to call that the descriptive analytics category.
Okay.
Is that right? Is that a thing?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, you got it.
If you make from 60 to 90K a year, we're going to call that diagnostic analytics. If you make from 90 to 120K a year, predictive analytics. And then 120K or above, prescriptive analytics. And I'm not saying that one of these analytics are better than the other. It's just what I Googled.
Okay.
So go ahead. You can share your salary.
I'm not sure where the labels for those buckets came from, but
I Googled different types of data analytics, and there were exactly 4, which worked out perfectly for me. But I'm assuming, if you want to find out, go YouTube it or do a boot camp and self-learn, because that's how you learn these things, right?
Yeah, right on. I currently fall in the 3rd category.
Predictive analytics.
Yeah.
Which is 90 to 120K a year.
But
there you go.
I expect to fall into the 4th for 2023.
Nice. All right. See, that's amazing. That is such great news, and congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
I also wanted to ask, kind of going back to your job, any cool stories or any random situations that you've encountered, or maybe any perks of the job that you didn't know existed until you started working there?
I found it really rewarding and really interesting to, use predictive analytics to
One of the categories.
yeah to like forecast the adoption of EVs in certain parts of the country, right? That are actually like reflective of, customer demographics in that area, that take into account, previous adoption rates and all sorts of, like, to use a data science term, exogenous variables, right? Like it's,
Ooh,
yeah.
fancy term.
So to know that, like, there are companies out there, like utilities in my case, who like desperately need this information, right? Because they're under a lot of pressure to make changes, to adapt, to anticipate what's about to happen in this critical decade for for the energy sector, for the clean energy transition. To know that like my work is informing some of those decisions is extremely rewarding.
And is it particular to Illinois, your company, or is it state, or is it nationwide?
No, so the EV case that I'm thinking of is California.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a major utility in California. But yeah, we have contracts with major utilities throughout the U.S., primarily on the coast.
Very cool. Very cool. No, I can imagine it can be very rewarding, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, has it ever happened that you're like running a case that you really want it to be good data, and then it ends up being like kind of negative, and you're like, hey, we can't recommend this? Has that ever happened?
Kind of, yeah. It's it can be questionable at times, for sure. I guess one other cool thing that I thought about, speaking of EVs, I wrote a little piece on EVs for the Chicago Tribune that was published.
Ooh, congratulations! What's it called? Do you remember?
They actually butchered the title. They completely changed it. But
These
that's
editors.
fine. Yeah, that's fine. I get it. Yeah, in the end, I think it was something like electric vehicle owners should prepare for a new relationship with ComEd.
All right. If anyone wants to read that, look for it when it was under your name, Mike Jehl.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike Jehl, electric EV.
Easy to read and understand. It's for a general audience.
All right.
But yeah, reporters reached out to me. It's like, wow, they think I know what I'm talking about.
I mean, you obviously did if you got published, so absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Like, a lot of people want to learn about this stuff, want to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's on everyone's minds. It's critical decade for this sort of work, and yeah, just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, like it's not easy to be able to look at data, look at numbers, and then explain it in a way that anyone could understand. Like that's not an easy task.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess that is kind of your job.
Yeah, it comes up a lot. Sometimes I'm presenting to like a very technical audience, and other times it's some random person at the utility who doesn't understand data or statistics at all. So, yeah.
That's very, very cool. All right, so last question, and then you'll be free.
Oh, okay.
Is there any advice for people that could have been in your same boat or that want to get into data analytics? What would be your last piece of advice for them?
Yeah, don't use your skills to design algorithms that hijack people's attention for social media apps.
Well, that's a good point. That's another. I feel like it's very shiny to like try to like go to like do apps and develop apps, but it could like you can use that same information for sustainability or to do some good in the world too.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Like, I get it. Like, everyone has to work a job and support themselves. That's just kind of the world we live in. But yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time to be doing this work, right? Like, this work has to be done. It impacts literally everyone around the world. So, yeah, I encourage people to, look outside themselves and what can benefit themselves individually and how their work can impact others. I think it can be very, very valuable, especially in the long run. I think we're sort of incentivized to think of like, okay, what sort of high paying job can I get straight out of college, or like what will get me the most money right away? And that might not always be the most gratifying long term. But yeah, we're at like an interesting moment in history. I think I've said this several times where like, economic and political forces are converging to allow for a lot of innovation and really important work to happen in all across the sustainability field. And there's a lot of money to be made, and job security now. Like, we're seeing shedding of jobs across big tech, and, climate tech really hasn't been impacted that much. comparatively. So yeah, it's a good time to be in this space.
Your advice is do it.
I think you should do it.
Yeah.
Whoever's listening to this podcast, yeah.
If you needed that extra push, there you go.
Yeah. There's also like a lot of really nice, kind, supportive people in this space, you know? So it's like, you know, participating in the clean energy leadership program that I did was particularly like valuable for community building. Like, so now it just feels good to be kind of like on a mission with other people, right? And I think we all realize that like we can't do it ourselves. You know, we all have to kind of work together and sort of chip away at different parts of this problem. And it's, you know, one of the biggest problems we face as a species. So it's like an existential threat.
That despair, but you're not alone, you know? It unifies people.
Exactly. No, it's yeah, I'm full of encouragement and optimism, actually, because there's a lot of bright, talented, kind people working in this space. So, and yeah.
That's really nice to hear. And I think
Yeah.
people also look for that when like going out alone into the real world. Like you need that type of community. So it's nice to hear that, you know, fighting for a common cause can unite yourself with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like looking back on, you know, your career in like 50, 60 years and realizing like, okay, well, maybe like I can't calculate the carbon emission reduction that I did with my work individually, right? But like,
I mean, I'm sure you could if you really wanted to, you could, but that would take a long
there might
time.
be data on that. Yeah. If I just like start recording everything that I do all the time. Yeah. Yeah. But like looking back and realizing that like, okay, like I was part of something that was bigger than myself, right? Like that, you know, my actions fell on the right side of history.
I can totally tell you took a philosophy class. All right, well, thank you so much. This has been such a good conversation, and I think you provided a lot of good information.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll inspire people to get into your industry, or at least like take that first step.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Cool. All right.